Or that's such a cool.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, we're good to launch.
Okay, I would like to call the April 12th meeting of the County Projects Advisory Board to order and start with the roll call
Bill Foster,
here.
William Messner,
Here.
Ben Kaiser. Not here. Kristen Rutherford,
Here.
Robert Chandler is not here. Bruce Johnson,
Here.
Cynthia Wagner.
Here.
Right. We have a quorum. Good to go.
Okay, so I'm gonna take it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of.
Okay, so we're here again, here together, holding our kickoff for CPAB, postponed from what would have been last month for extenuating circumstances. So this is an opportunity, just in a nutshell, go over, give you a little bit of an overview. And I know there are varying degrees of knowledge and experience with this. So some of it's going to be like, of course, and then for some people it's going to be a little new, but I don't want to go into too much depth and rather just consult with the people that's more, direct help individually. So to give a brief overview, kind of just reemphasize the process steps and deliverables and review the revised schedule that all of you should have. And really what the purpose of this is to get some face time, it seemed to be a little, like most people are online, face time with the board to interact, ask questions, and kind of confirm what expectations are. And if there's any kind of immediate questions you have for staff, me, that might benefit the group, we can bring those up and discuss them. But in general, it's just outlining the expectations, confusion that you have. So I just want to, some of you have seen this from a previous meeting, I just, since we had more people participating in this meeting, I just wanted to recap a little bit of the changes from last biennium. So all of the facility planning stuff was the unit that I was attached to was all consolidated in DAS IAM, Enterprise Asset Management. So when you see things coming from me that says that, or if you see Amy, who is our intrepid admin, we're in EAM now. So there's a split between EAM and where I used to be in CFO. We're kind of breaking that apart with different kind of responsibilities and sort of roles. So we're still working that out. We also adopted, more importantly, administrative rules that deal with a lot of legacy issues from years ago. They clean up and also sort of solidify, clarify, and update all the procedural aspects of the statewide facility planning process. So it's a little more transparent and clear about what your expectations are, how you do things, and to comply with the statute and the spirit of the statute, as well as just giving agencies better direction of things. Then we were poised to kick off, but we were asked by the governor's office to postpone things so they can meet with agencies to review projects ahead of the presentations. We've accommodated that, which necessitated us shifting and compressing our CPAB schedule. So I'll address that a little later, that the actual effect of that will be. And then we moved out our traditional kickoff meeting to April, which this would have been traditionally the group 1 day, so you've got some extra time, but we're gonna have to make that up. So that's sort of the recap. I think most importantly, what is new or what needs to be paid attention to are the changes that we did to the administrative rules and the process itself and how we updated the planning manual to accommodate that. So the new planning manual incorporates all the references from the updated administrative rules. So please review those and take notice of things that have been changed, or at least use it as a new baseline. But there's new definitions and terminology, so we're all talking about the same thing, and it's clear, it's up to date, it's not 20 years old, and doesn't reference something that's current. And then it better distinguishes the roles and responsibilities between DAS, CPAB, the Capital Planning Commission, which is the other entity that agencies have to interact with for their capital area projects in the city of Salem. And of course, the agencies, what everybody's responsibility are. And then there's also the key process steps and submission dates. I've outlined those in there very specifically, so there's no confusion about when something is due. There's a cadence to this, how we kind of administer this to ensure that we're having time to be able to review the materials for sort of accuracy to the best of our ability, but also there's public meeting requirements that require us to send materials out at a certain time and get the board an opportunity, time to review those materials. So the timeline and the due dates are hard coded for that purpose. It's that there's a necessary kind of turnaround time that we need to have for informing the board and also giving public notice. There's delineated all the submission guidelines, content requirements for agencies to submit per usual. And the criteria that the board will use in evaluating your projects or your plan reviews. And I think more importantly is we kind of clearly identified the capital area project review function that is statutorily assigned to Capital Planning Commission and their expectations about the process and the timing and all of the kind of administrative aspects of complying with their sort of role in reviewing capital area projects. It also includes one of the things that I've always heard as feedback is the process as a path, as a decision-making path, is not very straightforward for agencies who are submitting. So in an effort to kind of clarify this, we created a, if this comes up. And this new, it's basically a collection form that has all of the relevant statutes and administrative rules, references. And essentially this is like, I use this as a descriptor, but it's like TurboTax in the sense that you're filling out this basic information, but depending on the what you place for or what you choose for a specific answer, it will unlock further questions. And so you have this path where one could determine if the project that they have even needs to be reviewed, and if it does need to be reviewed, what are all the requirements, and it allows you to submit the requirements in this application. So that you upload like plan documents. And what that does is it will alert me, it geocodes everything, so we have it on the map. This consolidates a lot of the, I guess, the information gap that we have sometimes when you're notified that a project is sort of out there, or agencies are not sure whether or not it needs to be reviewed, what that process is. I get that, kind of a weekly basis. This is attempting to at least provide, the self-checkout option, for agencies to, figure this out, but I'm still to field phone calls if that's the case, but, so I just wanted to, that link is in the. So I would encourage you to review the manual, because this is sort of the first time we've had a manual that actually has verifiable references to administrative rules and statutes, and so we cleaned it up a lot. So try to put as much of that in there as possible, so it's transparent.
Just for budgets in the state of area or statewide?
It's a statewide, it's for everything. So it's for either, what it does is you have a capital project, determine if it's a capital project subject to any kind of review, and then who the reviewing entity is, and then the requirements for that. So it's for everybody, but there are capital projects that an agency might have that, say it's in Salem, that it's both, could be part of an agency facility plan, but it needs to be reviewed by the CPC to accord with the area plans requirements. So it's sort of a catch-all for everything, but it guides you depending on what the project specifics determine is the sort of the review path for the entity is. So.
And Melissa says excellent work on the manual. It's very helpful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have to apologize when I'm on this little screen here. I can't see the chat, so
That's fine.
I still have my.
He's doing a good job,
The chat. So, in terms of your agency deliverables, so we're clear, again, this is all in the manual, but we're still in this period where we're needing to fill out the agency facility plan workbooks, which is in part composed of an inventory component, which is all your buildings, your major and minor facilities. You're really only on the hook for major facilities, but minor facilities help us fill out the inventory. So if there's a new one or it's changed, we can denote that on that spreadsheet. But most of you should be familiar with these workbooks that essentially it's an outlay of all your facilities, what their prioritized cost expenditures are planned to be in the current planning cycle, and then in totality, just we're using a 10-year time frame. And all of you should have received workbooks from me that I updated all of the values based on the existing cost value that we have left over from the I-plan era, the faithful rule era, and I've just escalated those values, which were sort of frozen in 2020. And I just crudely escalated them using building cost index from ENR, which we agreed was the sensible approach. And I think that the attitude for me as staff is this is the best available information, and so you can adjust accordingly. But this is kind of the level of accuracy that we can muster given the circumstances, which are we have age information data system currently operating that allows us to manage that data in a reasonably effective way. It's kind of manual. So it's up to you to audit those values. If there's a reason why something doesn't make sense, or if there's a project that you have actually completed and it's still kind of in there in terms of cost, you can delete that. That's at the extent that, I mean, the important thing is the takeaway from it is the FCI that we use, the Facility Condition Index, is the measure, and ensure that there is an FCI calculated in those spreadsheets. It's intended to be an automatic calculated field. You need to ensure that what it's basing the calculations on are accurate. So it's worth reviewing if what those escalated values actually make sense within a margin of error. It's fine. And there's also the workbooks consist of 5 other components which are tied to the agency request budget, which are these DAS forms that go into basically the CFO analysts receive these as part of the agency request budget that you fill out as part of your agency facility plan. It's populated by the data that's in so it's somewhat self-serving, but it doesn't mean that what you would ultimately submit for your agency facility plan in total is going to match what is submitted in your ARB. It should, but I think sometimes there's circumstances where revisions are needed. So, so if you're not familiar with that, I can walk you through folks who want to talk to me specifically about that. But it's the typical 5 things, which are the narrative and all the summary documents that are about performance and cost and O&M and deferred maintenance. So those are one with that workbook. There's the presentation. So you filled out the workbook, you've sent it. I've reviewed it and looks good, but now you're going to present that to the board. What is this presentation based on? Well, the presentation there's some criteria and kind of expectations outlined in the manual. Some of it's kind of depends on your agency and your business and kind of what you have planned. But in general, it's the intent is to sort of align what you're asking for with some sort of basis of kind of a rational basis around what your planning goals are, as an agency, but also from your facility side. You have an agency strategic plan goal that may drive a program need. That program need may drive a facility need. So there's a logical linkage between those things that out of context, a request for something may not make total sense, but it is presented in a way where it's reinforced by a strategic plan or some sort of directive, then that is something to emphasize in your presentation.
And I think
Oh,
Jeremy did have a question. Yeah.
all right.
It's just real quickly, Daniel, there's a question. Is this just for Salem area buildings or statewide? I think that's really important just to continue to solidify that answer. That's in the chat.
About the intake form? Yeah.
I think you already addressed it.
Yeah, I already addressed. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you answer it.
Yeah, we talked about that. So it's just to reiterate, it's for all projects, just as a way of testing what you need to do in terms of process. So determine whether or not, if it's indeed within an area plan in the city of Salem, it'll guide you through the necessary steps to for the CPC, but it is for all capital projects. So, so the other component that we want is a cover memo. You remember this from last couple of biennium. This is sort of your statement and voice that would be from the agency to the board, for the board to have a sort of condensed understanding about what your drivers are, what you've accomplished over the biennium from the last CPAB. So it's like maybe an update on some big projects, or if there was something that prevented you from executing, what are the circumstances, just to have some sort of consistency in the narrative and explanation of these projects over time, and keep them in the kind of on the radar of the board. And what your facility plan will accomplish. So what you're asking for potentially money for this next session. What is that going to be used on? What will that actually accomplish? It's one thing to say I'm going to do some maintenance, but if it's fulfilling some sort of big need or accomplishing a goal, it's worth sort of characterizing that in some way, I think, given context. And, a brief description and cost about the major construction acquisition projects. So that in essence is like the executive summary of your plan. And that is beneficial to the board because those workbooks are dense and they don't synthesize what your plan is really trying to get at in a way that is kind of straightforward and easy. So that's the intent of the memo, and we want it on an agency memo, letterhead, and preferably signed by someone of authority, ultimately to ensure that what is being submitted in the plan is sort of the consensus at the agency that that's what it is good to go. That have been an issue in the past. So again, I just want to circle back to the fact that we're going to condense this schedule down by request. And as such, it went from 4 groups to 3 groups. And so everybody's been, sandwiched into a group accordingly. Basically, it's sort of affected the group 1 people more. We added more groups or more agencies to that group. So just to recap for folks that our new group 1 agency presentation date is the 14th of June. And we've expanded the time from 9 to 1. So it's a 4-hour sprint. But the sprint will have short breaks, snack breaks, bathroom breaks. But it's really incumbent upon these agencies. You see your agency listed there. That means you manage your time. 10 to 15 minutes with potentially with questions, because we have to squeeze all this in. It's a lot of talking, a lot of presentations, a lot of paying attention.
And Daniel, during this, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but during this, because it is so many people and so many agencies, I mean, we're going to have to be really strict and be condensed. So if somebody's going over, we're going to say your time's up and we're moving. Is that fair?
That is fair.
Yeah.
To mention ahead of time that this will have to be moderated, facilitated to be able to get through everything, because the board is contributing, 4 hours of their day, and they have day jobs. So we have to be respectful of that. So I'll be the bad guy, I guess. I'll be the.
As long as we use red cards.
Yeah.
We put up the red cards.
I think we've tried to do that.
Maybe
and,
good, like show.
Yeah.
but it's maybe necessary to be a little hard to hit than we have to.
I'm cool with whatever, our approach is to like.
So we can work it offline, but I think we need to have like
Yeah.
5 minutes, 2-minute warning so people know and
Yeah.
visually can see it so they can adjust accordingly.
Like the city council having their own lights.
Right.
Do that, same kind of thing. What?
So moving on to group 2, that'll be July 12th. Same duration, 9 to 1. Less groups, but the groups are the agencies are getting a little more complex in terms of their portfolio. And 7 presentations, estimate maybe 15, 20 minutes total for each. So that's, your agency name there, that's you. Then group 3, our final one, we're actually extending this into August. August, it's usually our cleanup month, but now this is August 9th, we're going to hold our last presentation. There won't be 5 presentations or any kind of select projects that we would review individually from agencies that have been capital asked. And I will know that ahead of time, but so those can be more effectively drawn out in their presentations, as instead of where we would have this separate meeting to discuss it. I think we're going to have to figure out how to accomplish both in that compressed time period. But I'm not sure what the size of the how many projects. I have no insights into that right now. So and maybe it's kind of moved, but so group 3 in August. So I've also in this presentation, so I've just reemphasized the key dates to fully comply with the requirements and the cadence of the process for having your project reviewed. So the schedule is set up where, as a matter of operational principle, and that the board, CPAB, would prefer to have their projects that they receive that are an capital area projects, either in Salem. CPC has currently been reviewing those projects, but there's different criteria, and CPAB wants to only look at projects that they know comply with the Capital Planning Commission. So they're, which just makes sense, you know, is it, does this comply with the area plan? And then as a capital project, we can review that. In execution, we'll see how that works in the compressed time period, but in principle, that is how it's supposed to work. And that's how the schedule is written, where, you know, if you have a capital area project that's part of your ABC facility plan, you need to have that reviewed by CPC first before, you know, we're living in this very short time period here. So we'll see how that works. So those are the deliverables, the groups. And so now we're just kind of transitioning to agencies have any questions of the board in terms of expectation, and or me. Just use this time as go into any other specific details that you need to go for. Though I'm always available to help individual agencies on their request.
So I guess.
I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah,
Bill.
as a starting point, any of the board members have anything that they would like to add? Or shall we just solicit questions?
I would just like to add, there's a tremendous value for the dash form, the 107. I think it's 10711. It's the one that has the major construction or acquisition, because in that form, you help everybody that's looking at the project from the gas perspective to see what's the project description, and then what are some of the technical aspects of the project? How is it going to be? How are you proposing that it's going to be financed? And then how much is going to be design? How much is going to be acquisition? How much is going to be maybe renovation? So in a short order, we can just look at one of those forms and we can learn a lot about your vision, your scope. And that's also useful to you as you prepare your summary letter. because you've already written up your description. And so that same information is really simplifying the memo letter, the cover letter, because you've already thought through your goal and your objective. We find those dash forms tremendously helpful. I know that the folks over at LFO and CFO also value those. And we use them often for a roll-up. Sometimes we'll need to say, okay, what's the bonding capacity? Or someone over at Treasury and DAS will have to do an assessment. So that helps them. And it also helps you and it helps us.
Any,
I would just say I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I just recognize that Daniel and team have done a lot of work to make this a lot smoother. I appreciate it. I know we all appreciate that. And that's, I think you're going to see a much improved process. I would just say that the signal, like some of the questions that I asked during the presentations is that my background is, I'm with the utility. I talk a lot about resiliency. And so those were like, are we planning? What are the resiliency plans? What are you thinking about? Are you building that into your structure? Are you building that into your thought process? I know when we came out of post-pandemic, we started asking a lot of questions about office space. Like, do we even need all this stuff? What are we doing? The past is definitely not the future, and it's definitely not the present. So are you looking at that in terms of office space as well? So I'm just signaling the questions that I tend to think about, so.
anything?
No, I think that just, I'm always very interested in the office space. The space planning, right, is always a struggle, and always as you think, how do you plan for the future? Do you shrink or do you grow? So I would reiterate that. And then certainly the more we know about the big picture and how your projects fit in, the better.
Yeah.
That's those how we make decisions
Any
or
thoughts?
make recommendations. Yeah.
Any thoughts, Kristen?
Sorry, I'm having problems with my microphone here. No, I don't have anything to add. This
Well,
is, I've served on the Business Oregon's Infrastructure Finance Authority process where we review projects from around the state, and it's in many ways, a very similar process.
Well, one of the things that continues to be telling to me, when I worked in this building years ago, there was a private parking lot that I parked in. There's 2 cars in it this morning. It used to be full. It really shows how things have changed and evolved, and is the challenge in front of all of us. So any questions for the board?
I guess I have a question. So being from a smallish agency, we really benefited from the iPlan, the FCA program that we had back in the day. With that kind of having its problems and not having that data quite at our hands, how much are you expecting us? Because, in some of our strategic plan, we want to refresh our FCA in the next year or two because, it's only a 10-year lookout. We want to keep that going. I know Jeremy and Daniel are looking at the Triega piece to get us back to an actual overall system. So I just wonder this time, how much are you going to be looking for those specific, the index numbers and stuff that maybe a smaller agency might be out of date on that and might not have right at hand. I'm just trying to keep also just maintenance in general going. So.
I guess the question is, I mean, if those numbers are out of date, just put them in context.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because we understand, right, there's limitations.
And I think, we've had the discussion about maybe some way to index this that has been looked at over the years. And sort of the conclusion was the engineering news report was maybe one of the best that we had to deal with. But it has its issues. And, these are not precise numbers. So it's kind of a tendency and a direction and a trajectory that I think that this is really trying to capture. So I think there's an understanding that these aren't going to be real precise.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, Kristen.
Thanks. So just listening to that question and thinking about some past experiences, I think that one thing that could also be helpful is, and more so depending on where the project is in the state, but challenges and delays based on local contracting resources and local labor availability, supply chain. And if that's anticipated in your budget and cost projections, because I've seen so many projects around the state be delayed and delayed and delayed because of just not finding the resources to do the work within the time frame originally anticipated. So if a contingency takes that into account, or if there's any expectation that there may be challenges of doing work within a certain time frame.
Yeah, and that's a well taken point. I know years ago when they were doing some of the youth authority facilities, the ones over in Eastern Oregon, the prices were totally different. The availability of contractors, the availability of materials have really skewed that. And you probably have some experience with the outlying areas where the labor market and all is different.
Yeah, we've seen that, for example, at Southern, they had a lead time of at least a year for a transformer for Central Hall. And so even though they had the lofty goal of having the whole Central Hall renovated and brought back to a classroom and a lab, they're at the kind of beck and call of the suppliers. And so we have to factor that in, and you have to factor that in when you're making your projects. You have to think if it's structural steel or if it's other kinds of product, or if it's an acquisition. You have to be thinking about those factors when you're building your case.
Yeah, just switching topics a little bit, Bill, that I know some agencies have found it. We've done some field trips in the past, right? And so that's, if we can make that work, then that's, it was eye-opening to me when we did the one field trip that I got to go on. So it's just like, that's something that we can try to do as well.
Said that electrical gear is currently 70 to 75 weeks out.
Oh,
Wow. And elevators and other specific things have their issues.
2 years now.
And who knows what the impact of the bridge in Baltimore is going to be. Because that's a major work to have. They did that all trailered up and open. There's supply things that
Supply chain
from there.
Yeah, find issues throughout.
It's a challenging market. Any other thoughts or questions?
Another hand up, Paul.
All from OHA.
Oh,
OHA.
hello, hi, I'm Paul here, Physical Plant Operations for Oregon Youth Authority. Some of the feedback our CFO is receiving from DAS and maybe LFO is a little confusion about the bond sales versus the appropriation for the bonds. As you know, the appropriations for the bonds are 6-year limitations, and the funding needs to be expended by that time frame. But the bonds are typically sold a couple times a year, and there's a 3-year limitation for the spending, or 3 years to expend that money for that bond sale. So we're getting questions on the amount of funding that we would receive for that specific biennium. What happened with one of our projects is it was an $11 million project to build a school location. But on our spending plan for bonds, we were going to expend $4 million with that within the 23-25 biennium. Well, long story short, we only received the $4 million for what we could spend in that biennium, the 23-25 biennium. But that really hinders us because although we can move forward with the design to get the full design accomplished, we don't have funding to execute a contract, so we can't enter into a construction contract because we don't have the, the authority to spend the money, and we haven't been awarded the money because we're still lacking that $8 million or $9 million for the actual construction that we will now have to request in the 25-27 biennium. So I think there's a disconnect with, project phasing, or maybe there's not, maybe we just don't have a good understanding. But in the past, we were always awarded the full project cost, and then we had that full 6 years to expend that. And now we're getting told that if we ask for a project in 25-27, we're only going to get funding that we can expend during the 25-27 biennium, which will cause us a problem that we'll have to delay the construction for another biennium before we can go back and ask for the remaining funding to complete that. So wanted to get some feedback on that, or some assistance with that.
Camera is,
Cameras.
yeah.
Go ahead, Cameron.
Camera?
Cameron, are you?
Nope.
No.
Well, I'll just say.
Can you guys hear me
Yes.
now?
I
Okay,
gotcha.
it's always, I never know which devices I'm supposed to pick on these darn Zoom versus Teams meetings for what microphones work and what don't. So sorry about that. Anyway, and I would be on camera, but I'm a little bit under the weather and you really don't want to see me. Paul, I just have a quick question for you. So who is giving you the advice that, okay, I guess I need to understand this a little bit better. Are you saying that if you have a capital project worth, a total capital project worth, and I'm just gonna pull a number out, $50 million, and we know you're not gonna expend the full $50 million in the 23-25, or let's say, for example, it's a new request for 25-27. You're not gonna spend that whole 50 million in the 25-27 biennium. For capital projects, we've never limited you to what you can spend in the biennium with respect to limitation. So I don't know why you would only be getting the limitation that you could spend, because it's a 6-year limitation on capital projects. But my question is this really a limitation issue, or is it we can only sell bonds for what we think you're going to expend in the 25-27 biennium?
Well, I think it really truly is a bond sale issue, but the feedback that we're getting is that's what the appropriation will equal. So if whatever that is, they're not going to give us the full amount or award the full amount for the project.
They're just going to give you what the bond sale amount is. And,
right.
So this is the first time I'm hearing that. So, and you'll have to just excuse my lack of deep knowledge on this. Who are you getting the information from? And you don't have to out anybody. If you want to send me an email, you can do that. But is it coming from the capital investment folks in our office, or is it coming from LFO? Or because it just sounds like maybe what we need to do is get some folks together to have a conversation about why is this happening? What I mean, because this sounds like a little bit of a change to me from how I've dealt with capital projects in the past for agencies that I've had. And I had ODOT when they did their headquarters restructure renovation. And so we just may need to get some folks together to have a conversation to get on the same page and figure out what's going on. And I'd be happy to kind of convene that, but I'm trying to figure out where the information is coming from so I know who to contact and how we can get answers back out to you. Because this does sound a bit confusing to me, given how I've handled capital projects in the past.
Okay, no, that sounds great. I can offline give you some contact information to be able to pull the right folks together and have the conversation, because it definitely places a lot of obstacles. And we have some A&Es that potentially have retirement in their plans. And, so if we could design a project and then we have to wait 2 more years for more funding to be able to enter into a construction contract, we could lose that A&E, and then we'd basically almost have to start from scratch because, a lot of A&Es don't want to use other people's work, moving forward with the project. So no, I appreciate the conversation. It's definitely a hindrance to the program. If we,
Yeah. Why don't you shoot me an email and I'll see and I'll pull together a meeting, and I might be asking you to come into that meeting to help understand the issue better, because you're obviously going to be able to explain it better than I will because you're experiencing it. But I'd be happy to put something together to see if this is just a miscommunication or if there's actually now new requirements that we are having to live by with respect to not being able to give the full amount of the project limitation, but having to give out the limitation in bits by bond sale. So let's just send me something offline, and we will I will see what I can do to help work through this.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet. And if any other agencies on the line are experiencing the same thing, if you want to send me an email, say same issue here, I'll at least know how many agencies are experiencing it, and that'll help inform the conversation. And now I'm going to mute myself.
Okay.
Any other questions? I guess hearing none, I would give it back to you for the next agenda item, Daniel.
Great. So I just want to thank everybody for showing up and the questions that were asked. The next thing we want to talk about is a little bit of an update on what Michael was alluding to, and I want to introduce my colleague, Paul Tosh. If he's on. So Paul, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Daniel. Hello, everyone. Can you see me?
We got you.
Okay. Yes. Hello. Thank you. My name is Paul Platosh. Like Daniel said, I work with Daniel and Jeremy at EAM. And I was asked to come here to give you a quick status update on our Tririga project migration. So there's a few things for you to bear in mind as we kind of come into it, because we're just about ready to kick it off. So let me just get my slideshow up here. I just got one quick slide to show you, and then a timeline that I think will be helpful to kind of think about some spots. So let's see. I got to do sharing. Okay, how do I do that? Share. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, I just not sure how many folks are familiar with the whole history of iPlan to Tririga. So I thought I'd spend a second here just to kind of refresh memories. We are on a EAM has been using Tririga SaaS for several years. A SaaS is software as a service. It's on version 11.3, and recently, with the demise of iPlan, it was decided that Tririga could serve as our FCA system of record. EAM has basically a site license for it that we're able to leverage for working on this module. So little bit of history in here. We've actually been running Tririga for a long time, but the way IBM structured it in the past was per module. So it was installed at the state data center, and each module cost a certain amount, and it was kind of confusing. And so iPlan was selected and converged upon as our FCA solution because it was a SaaS, it was in the cloud, and it was cheap, and it was available. So now, obviously, iPlan became a victim of the pandemic, and IBM in that same time has moved to its own cloud solution. So our Tririga is a cloud solution, meaning you can access this software from any browser. that makes it very versatile. Also, the pricing structure has changed. They've done away with the module concept, and now when you buy Tririga, you get the whole thing, and you sort of pay per license. So that's where it suddenly has become very different and cost effective to suggest the Tririga as our solution. So I work with a group, and like Daniel says, we work together at EAM. I also was from the facility planning unit, so I'm now at EAM as a facilities systems admin. But that happy coincidence makes me very familiar with the iPlan data. I kind of understand it, its structure. It's sitting on servers at Geo, and basically we're getting ready here by the end of the month to start our design of the facility condition module within the system. So that's going to start in phases. So our phase one is going to be the import of iPlan data. And there's some things to think about here. With iPlan or with Tririga, I like to describe it really as a toolbox of tools rather than a solution. So you take your toolbox and you go build your solution. So we have a little bit of thinking to do, even to take the FCA module and prepare it for import of iPlan data. So we're on a very tight schedule. It's gonna the whole thing is gonna go about 9 months, and there will be certain places where agencies will have an opportunity to weigh in on how this migration occurs. Okay, and that will be in a discovery and design period. There will be 2 weeks, and in that time, we'll have things like the customization of fields. And I do plan on showing you just briefly here the Tririga FCA module, so give you a few examples of what I mean by saying customize a field or changing something. I'll sort of show you. There's an out-of-the-box condition that we want to stay close to, but we do have an opportunity to tinker with it and to make it specific to our business needs. So there's some of this that during this time we'll have that, but it's only to a 2-week period. So this is where, we need to marshal resources and make sure everybody's is familiar with the time frame and the schedule, and get ready for that when it occurs, and make sure the systems subject matter experts are in line and all of that stuff. We will have a time to talk about design decisions, because like I said, it's a box of tools rather than a tool itself. So there will be places where we can not only customize fields to accept iPlan data, but also look towards the future. For some agencies who are using their own IWMS systems, and Tririga is an integrated workplace management system, we do recognize that not every agency is planning on using Tririga. They want to keep their own systems. So we are also in the part of this first phase creating integrations for their systems. And it's a template-based integration, meaning that, folks who have their own systems, like ODOT has Z-Link, we will sort of build a port for them to be able to land their data within iPlan so that it can be subsumed in the process of budgeting. So that kind of we're building kind of a single multi-purpose template for those who want to continue to use their own systems but need to avoid duplicating data entry. That's our hope here, so that we'll have a place for this. In that first phase, we will also have a training week. So not everybody knows how to use Tririga. Those who might, will need to review QA and QC their imported data from iPlan. We'll need to know what to do, what to look at, which buttons to press, and so we'll have a week for that training. Once we've stood up the system, we will have what we call UAT, or user acceptance testing. This is an opportunity for us to make sure it's all working. So that is also simply a 2-week period. So that our IBM partners will create a testing environment for us, and we'll get in there, and we want you to see if you can break it, do your daily business, and see if there's any problems that show up. And a lot of that will be for those of us who are deciding to do integrations. We'll want to test that integration. So if you're a Z-Link user, you want to put some data into Z-Link and make sure that it pops up in the proper spot within Tririga. So That's the main thing here. So that's kind of our phased rollout, our phase one. Like I said, there is a phase two, which will be related to kind of rethinking how we do inspections, and that's going to occur at the end of this. Once this phase, this first phase of importing our historic data has occurred. Like I said, this is a 9-month process here, so this might be a little small for you all to see, but as you can see, discovery and analysis starting on kind of week 1 and 2, and then design is in here. So somewhere in here, we'll have our 2-week opportunity for design charrettes and thinking about how that integration occurs. And then down at the ending here, you can see somewhere in week 18 and 19 is, I think they should have said UAT testing, but training. Anyway, 18 and 19, right here at the end of it is when we'll do our testing concept. So, this process has been a long time to get here. This was a stage gate process, and we just received our level 3 endorsement for stage gate. So it means it's right now currently at DOJ and cybersecurity services, and we're doing our legal sufficiency testing on the contracts and all of that. So that's where we're kind of waiting on that. We anticipate that to be completed, fingers crossed, by the 30th of this month. Of course, I don't know, it may go a little bit longer than that, but it just shows you that if you start counting from the 30th here, this third week is coming in pretty fast. So that's mainly what I wanted to mention here, is just we will need to engage agencies here in 2 spots. The beginning here, 2-3, and then at the end at 18-19. It's a 2-week period. So it's kind of thing where we have to have good engagement and responsiveness because, the clock is ticking. It's like a taxi cab sitting at the corner and we're paying for that. So we want to make sure that we have good use of that time. So that's kind of the main thing. I thought maybe here, hold on. I thought I could just quickly show you Tririga because I know many of you are probably unfamiliar. I'm an admin on this thing, so I have this doesn't
Paul?
look like what. Yes.
There's one question in the room.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, I couldn't read that. When does the 2-week period start for importing the data?
Yeah, so it depends on when we actually kick off. So if for example we do kick off at the end of the month, it'll be the middle of May. So middle to the end of May would be that. And if we kick off a little later, again, we're waiting for DOJ. They've got to do their reviews. So if we, you can kind of start thinking from there as we get delayed, that'll be around then.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions?
I just think that to follow up on your comment, I think even though we don't know exactly the date and all this kind of stuff, I think it's important for agencies to kind of pinpoint who would be the person that would interact with Paul to transfer the data, so you can prep and get familiar. And I think if there is a transfer of data that occurs, I assume it's the vendor who's transferring the data, right? One of them starts. Paul?
I'm sorry, I was a little garbled there. Can you repeat what you said?
The vendor is transferring the data. Quantum Strides?
Yes, the vendor is transferring the data, but they are doing that at our behest. So
Okay.
They won't know what to do unless we tell them. They will write the SQL code to transfer that data, but they're going to need to know that this data element belongs here. This data element belongs there. We want to keep this. We want to delete this. There's a lot of thinking on this that I just want to make sure everybody understands, because it's not going to be the kind of thing where we can just hand it over and walk away in 9 months and it'll be done. We have active participation on this project.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think seems very simple, but you'll have like some records in your iPlan data that you want to take out immediately, so it doesn't act. Otherwise, you're just going to have to clean it up again. So even though this is going to be a time-based process with a vendor doing it, we'll make sure that you've because I know there's some buildings that people have, agencies have demolished or whatever, but they're still kind of in the records.
Mhm.
So I think that part of that is making sure we got clean data in, because Paul and I have been the stickler about that, because we've been haunted by that data being, garbage in, garbage out. So I just want to emphasize that from my end is make sure that we're not importing things that shouldn't be there. So that's something you can do as an agency, identify the person who's most knowledgeable, but also maybe make sure you have vendor-ready information in terms of the inventory, what buildings are current, I guess.
Yeah, and as we get closer, I can kind of make it more real for you by giving you a spot in the system to start looking at data. But yes, what Daniel's saying is what I'm really trying to hammer home here is that we need to have a person. And we can start communicating and getting ready and answering questions and doing all that kind of thing, so that when go time happens, we are going.
Good question, Michael.
So I have a question. This is a kind of future question, but I kind of mentioned earlier, on our plan, we're hoping to update our FCA. Is in your guys' plans where whatever we do in this on like, how it looks, what's the field look like, we could have that. So when we go out to like procure a FCA, we're matching field. We're not having to like re-engineer the data that's going in the system, refreshing, just kind of that thought. And then Jeremy and I talked a while ago about what is the possibility of, agencies who might want Tririga as their CMMS that kind of leads up into this, and just kind of thinking long-term about that too, so.
Yeah, I'll just take that first part there. Absolutely, this is why I'm giving you this time here on the both on the design side, is to anticipate exactly that. So we want to make sure that we're spending, funds on this, and it's not a exercise just to bring in iPlan data. It is for looking down the road to actually begin to use Tririga as its system. So yes, it's I want us to be able to think about kind of both parts. We want to satisfy what we want to be doing to get that old data in there and to make sure we're using our historical record, but also cast an eye to the future for potentially using Tririga for a system that we will need in perpetuity. And I think in the second part of that, Jeremy, maybe you might want to address that.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you could finish what you're presenting, and then once you conclude, and I can kind of talk about phase 2 and
Okay,
in the
perfect.
future.
Perfect. Yeah, okay. I just want to show you all quickly what I mean, because I think this will make it more real for you to see when I say like we're going to customize fields and whatnot. What are we talking about? So the FCA module exists, and then you click on buildings here, and it sits in a tab up here. So you select the building, for example. Here's the 550 building. We could pick up that one, and the record comes up for that, and there's a tab here called assessment. When you click on that, it brings up your FCA module. And so in here, you'll see things like calculated end of useful life, and there's a formula associated with that. Here's a replacement cost. There's a formula. So, we can tinker with that. It can be weighted in a different way. We can kind of make it go to our own needs. And then here's your FCI, your facility condition index, levels 1 and 2. Out of the box, Tririga ships with 5 levels. But in our iPlan data, we actually happily have 5 levels, but one of them is seismic. It's specifically seismic. So it's less about condition of building, more about deficiency in a particular area. So that is not really transitive. So we want to make sure that we kind of account for that when we bring in that old data to see how we're gonna do. Or we can change Tririga to weight seismically a little different than what it is out of the box in its current condition. So that's what you have. And then, for example, here, there's nothing in here right now because it's it hasn't been configured. This is what our project will be. Your building system items will be here. We have to determine what level of, so it's uniformat 2. and what level do we want to go to? Is it level 1 and 2, or level 1, 2, and 3, or is it even to level 4? Those are things that we can anticipate now as we start thinking about that. But if you're just working on level 1, you'll have your major systems. Level 2 will have some of the subsystems. Level 3, you have components. Level 4 will be assemblies. So, you kind of go down that line of increasing granularity. Of course, effort increases as you increase granularity. So those will be completed here, shown. The deficiencies are called, they don't call them deficiencies, they call them opportunities. So as yes. So as inspectors find deficiencies, they're going to be listed here. And you'll see, again, it tells you system class. It'll give you a assignment of a priority, an opportunity class, a repair class. So estimated repair costs, and that could be RS means data or inputted manual data. Kind of however way you want can be done here. But so these are places to think about. Do we want to change what is considered what as a priority? So there's be some kind of subject matter expertise that'll be needed within this. There is also a green, there's a green condition index. So that's for your sustainability stuff. There's a level here that's built into that. That's maybe not necessarily what is in the purview of traditional FCA, but it could be something that we decide to move into. So all of this, right, is packed into 2 weeks design phase, and we'll want to make sure we're taking advantage of that. So that's what that's it. I just wanted to show you quickly all what we're talking about, and you can start to get you thinking about, Tririga is infinitely modifiable. It's intended to be customized. So how, if we want to do that, we're beginning this first phase of importing old data. How do we begin to customize it to accept that data, but also then cast an eye to the future for a real FCA? So with that, I'll stop unless there are any other questions.
All right, well, maybe I'll just take just a couple of quick moments because it's a whole nother conversation, but that was phase 1. And one thing Paul was saying there, we have 2 weeks. We don't want to panic because that's 2 weeks for phase 1. And then we're going to roll into what we're calling phase 2. So a little bit more of an explanation there. Phase 1 was a package 104 that CFO received funding to transfer our data from iPlan into Tririga. That's the goal. That's what the funding was for. And then I have funding for DAS-EAM in place to create phase 2, which is where we're going to be able to take House Bill 3409, which has a lot of sustainability information that we need to create from our assets and collect that data. So we want to build that into this FCA as well. Plus, that phase 2 is going to be opportunity. And my hope is to partner with the Capital Planning and Advisory Board and state agencies to determine this is the way we've practiced FCA in the past, but these are the things that we think might be better for the future, and try to really look at it from a lens from a CPAB, CFO, facility maintenance manager, property owners, because there's a bunch of different lenses that use an FCA. So we need to evaluate it that way and make sure that we're actually delivering modern data and not data just because that's the way we did it in the past. So that's phase 2. So this first 2 weeks is just to get this thing off the ground. And then as we go into phase 2, that's going to be a much more collaborative effort to where we're all working together and trying to learn, do we call it good, great, or best? I think that's one of the scales. Or can we use a different scale? Because that's what Tririga has. And it's just a matter of us bending our minds a little bit to understand, hey, this is free. We just have to use a different word. So that's where the big effort's coming. That's where we're really going to lean on this board to help partner to be able to get to where we need to be in the future. With that said, that's the software. And then I see the question here, we hear it quite often. What about the FCA, the actual boots on the ground that are gathering the data? So we have started creating a contract that will be an enterprise solution, but it's taking a little bit of time because HB 3409 is so full of opportunities. So Daniel is teasing all that information apart right now in partnership with our statewide sustainability officer. And we're pulling out all those data points so that we know what we have to include within that FCA contract so that we're gathering it and documenting it all in one place. So right now we're on schedule to phase one to complete, we're hoping in the next few months, 4 months. And phase two is already started quietly in the background. And our goal is to have a fully functional facility condition assessment module ready for the 27-29 budget build. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to have fresh data within that, but there will be a contract in place, the module will be functional, and then agencies will need to go and request funding for said FCA to refresh their data. And that will all be broke out in the contract. And then we'll build the contract where if you just need HB 3409 data, you can just get that. Or if you need to just do one address, you can just do one address. So the agencies have some flexibility in their funding and how they will gather the data that they need in the future. So that's kind of the big picture. And we'll come back to this group probably after budget build and have a project plan and share where we're going to need help and partnership and collaboratively work together so that we can deliver the best project in the end. Are there questions about that? I silenced the room with too much information.
Actually, Jen Kaufman asks, will interagencies be required to use Tririga? We currently have a federal program we are required to use for all our facility data.
So OMD, so Paul, I'm going to let you answer this one, but there is most likely a way to feed it into our Tririga so that CFO is analyzing the same type of documents.
Yes, exactly. There won't be a requirement for that. It's that's what the integration is. So in my previous slide, I was showing you the phase and the building of integrations. So what we're going to do is we're going to build you a landing pad for that data, and it's going to reach out to you to a certain way, and then I hope to work with your team to build from that side in, and we'll meet in the middle. And that way you won't need to. The goal is to not have to enter data twice, right? Like it's going to be a single entry, and we'll be able to accept that data. At the end of this, Tririga will have sort of a pre-built, we call it a BERT report. It's a business intelligence reporting tool that will just kind of create the report needed for CPAB directly out of the software with a single click. That's the hope. So it should be all smooth, and the goal is to try to reduce effort, not get more.
This is a very exciting project from a facility owner perspective. When we replace a chiller and we do that in our O&M section, FCA automatically updates. So in the past, we had worked with Gene and Alice's group, and we would go through with a Sharpie, and then we would manually input the data. But this, every time we change an asset out, it automatically updates. And then when it comes to budget build time, we're building a report to where we click a button, and what this group determines that we need to report out on, all that data should just self-populate. And so it will just be the truth, and there will not be human adjustments made. We'll call it that. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. So, Daniel, where are we now?
Where are we now? Well, first of all, just to put a button on that, I just want to thank everybody. Value all your work and effort, and we're trying to make it better. And I know I've been alluding to this project for years now. It's kind of embarrassing to say it's slowly coming along, but it's a stage-gate process, and we're going to deliver a product that's, I think, going to solve a lot of problems and meet a lot of needs. And it's now, I wanted to introduce Paul and everything because it's a real boy now. And it's happening, and I don't have to stay. It's like this ethereal thing that's out there. It's going to happen. So in essence, this is a progress report. We made progress. And it also, I've kind of like downplayed the workbooks and everything is because we're not going to be doing that next time, but we just don't have exactly what that configuration is going to be, but hopefully it'll be super easy, as Jeremy says, versus this manual approach. So we're just excited about that. It just, it's taken a while. So I guess my appreciation to all the team that's been working to put this together and everybody's patience, so. Other than that, I don't have any other, is there anything we need to clean up in the chat?
In the chat, there are two questions. A new FCA costs a significant amount of funding. Finding that funding is always challenging. Is there any chance an agency could be approved to use SB 1067 funding to perform the FCA?
Well, that's
That sounds like a Jeremy question.
well, that's actually, I think it's more of a CFO question. Access to color of money, how it's used.
And then Sharon asked, any idea of what an agency will pay to have the software?
So currently, right now, the software is an enterprise solution. So that's from EAM. We own the instance of Tririga. There's some licensing costs, and right now we're setting it up, and it's a minimal cost for other agencies. Obviously there's a cost to have an FTE that's maintaining the data on the agency side. So right now there is no cost for the FCA module, and I cannot answer the other question. I know our old contract was what was it, Daniel, 53 cents a square foot? We have no idea what that's going to be now because we've seen radical inflation over time. So we'll share with the group what that costs per square foot. We just don't know right now.
Different contract approach, everything, so.
So do state agencies pay that assessment regardless of whether they use Tririga or only if they're using Tririga?
Well,
Oh,
so-
oh, there's no
It's just
assessment.
the Software that is the box.
Oh.
The FCA, as exercise is a contract that is gonna,
Oh, gotcha.
vendors gonna go out and assess buildings. And that's something that is specific, and we're just trying to make sure that it has a place to go for at least the CPAB process and is manageable. So it's kind of two different things. One is like you're building this system to support it, and then you have this whole other process to go out and get the information that populates it.
And so,
We're kind of salvaging what we can from the iPlan stuff. But
so just a clarification, the second part of that is you guys are going to do a statewide price agreement for an FCA like we did when Alice and Jean were here?
yeah, but I think it'll be a little bit more customized for what we want to achieve.
Yeah, with
That
the House bill.
other one was kind of made do with the contract that.
Bayfield Gould one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is a little more thought through, and it also includes things that, as Jeremy mentioned, that agencies are going to be required to report, and it's pretty robust, so.
Okay, that's just good for agency to know, because I don't want to go out and go do my own FCA. If you guys are working on one, I can act that way too, so. It's good to know, so I can bring back to my leadership team on just.
Right, and we're not going to make a decision the reason that contract hasn't been fully developed yet is we want to match it to what the software can provide. Plus, we want to know what CPAB wants to see, plus we want to know what CFO wants to see, and then we want to talk to all the agencies and see if there's any intricacies that they want to add to that contract. And we want it to be very selective as to what data it's collecting, because the more data you collect, the higher the price is, the harder it is to be funded. So we want to be really smart about this and gather the information that is needed and necessary to better maintain our buildings in the state of Oregon. So just for clarification, software is something that's an enterprise solution. There is no assessment for that. The FCA, the cost per square foot to gather the information, is what the agencies will have to request funding for.
Great, I like it.
And then there's a whole nother layer, the IWMS solution, if you want to use the maintenance or the project module and all that. We're working on that. We are looking to make that an enterprise solution. And then there would be an assessment and or some type of payment that the agency would make.
Okay,
Right there yet.
thanks, Jeremy.
You bet.
Well, unless there's any other questions, I think that's all I have.
Lori Friesian also asked, are agencies going to be required to pay? Because OPRD has their own system, but I think it ties back to what OMT was asking. Jen asked the question and Paul gave the answer.
Yeah, again, I'll just kind of reiterate the integration port that I'm building in the system is multi-use. So we'll be like an airport, wherever whoever wants to fly in on a different plane can land. So we'll be okay with that. You have options.
All right, are we good?
Right. I guess you have on the agenda, we're a kind of funny hybrid committee board because we are following public meeting requirements, but we're actually advisory to the director. But I guess I would offer the opportunity for any public comments. And hearing none, I would call us adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everybody. If you have questions,
Thank you.
reach out.
Thank you.
Rob, thank you for sitting at the big table.
Thank you.
Good to be back in the room.
Yeah.
Bill?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Just different colors, right?
Oh, yeah.
So come.
Do you use like a facility physician at the hospital?
You know, that's interesting. Irregularly, I was just thinking about this. They're talking